Hello, you're about to hear Good Morning Seminole, our monthly signature event. Please enjoy.
Imagine a day in the future when you can get up in the morning, you can go to the Sunrail station right down the road in Lake Mary, you can jump on the train, you can take the train all the way down to Miami, have lunch in the middle of downtown Miami overlooking Biscayne Bay, come back, ride the rail to downtown Orlando, watch the Magic in Game 7. Yeah, this is a fantasy world. In the future, but parts of this will be real. Watch the Magic game, hop on Sunrail again, come back to Lake Mary, have a late night dinner and snack or something, a couple of drinks at the transit station here, and then of course catch an Uber or something to your home just a couple of miles away. All in one day, all without driving more than a mile in your own car, all done by rail. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the future of rail here. We have some very, very good people. If our panelists could just come on up, we'll introduce you while you're talking. We have Commissioner Bob Dallari from Seminole County. We have Bob O'Malley. They're sitting next to each other, so I can't just say Bob and Bob, but it'll be Commissioner and Bob. John McReynolds from Universal Orlando, and also Christine Kefauver with Brightline. And if you haven't driven on 528, yes, give them a nice round of applause. We drove to West Palm Beach on Sunday and watched the rail lines being put down right alongside 528. As a former transportation reporter and also working with Congressman Micah in transportation, this is all very exciting. My wife thinks I'm weird for looking at transportation projects with such glee.
This podcast is sponsored and produced by AVL Essentials, your essential audiovisual production company. From podcasting to live event production, we have you covered. Please visit avlessentials.com to learn more about us.
Are recording this for our wonderful Seminole County Chamber cast, which all of our Good Morning Seminoles are available to listen to as you're driving, as you're riding rail, as you're on Sunrail needing something to do, listen to it on the way back, but keep the microphones closed. Let's start out very generally on rail system. I think most people think we're talking about rail to move people around. That's not the full picture. Why are communities like ours, why should we want a rail system that is comprehensive and part of our transportation plan? Commissioner?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us here. I got three quick questions first. I'd like to ask the general audience, if you don't mind. Who's been on Sunrail for the last 2 years? Who's been on Sunrail? Raise your hand. Great. Keep your hands raised. Who's been on Sunrail the past year? Raise your hand. Okay. Lower your hands. Who believes that Sunrail is all about transportation? Raise your hand. Okay. Sunrail is about economic development. That's what Sunrail is about. Economic development around each one of our four stations, as well as the other stations around Central Florida. In order to move people in masses, you can't move them by car. In order to do development, you have to have density. When you develop around the Sunrail stations, you're supposed to have as much density as transit or development. From there, the byproduct is transportation, which is transit. It's moving people. That's what Sunrail is about. Sunrail is about economic development. It's a model that works. Brightline's been using the model for a long time. Other areas have used it. And a good example of that is in Utah, Salt Lake City. If you've ever been to Salt Lake City, they've used the same model. It works. Economic development. That's what Sunrail is about.
Christine, why do we need a comprehensive rail package?
First of all, thank you for inviting us this morning. I think people are looking for choices, right? I mean, how many lanes can actually be part of I-4? We've just completed the ultimate I-4, so then what's next? I think people look at it for a quality of life issue as well. So Brightline currently operates from Miami, West Palm Beach, from Fort Lauderdale to West Palm Beach. There are folks that take that train every day as part of their commute. And there are other people who are taking it purely for leisure. I'll write it sometimes and I'll ask people, what was the purpose of your trip? Well, I've joined some people downtown in Miami for lunch, had a few cocktails, and I'm riding back home. So I think it's about quality of life and choice. And as you know, I have a daughter who's living in DC who chooses not to own a car. And wouldn't it be great if she chose to live here and chose not to have a car as well and had mobility options to get her to where she needed to go and wanted to go?
Bob?
Again, thank you for having me here. So in the United States, we have the greatest rail system in the world when it comes to moving freight, right? But we kind of lag on passenger. But the two can coexist. So we're very, very, very good at moving freight in this country. And from an economic development standpoint, that's huge. But how else can we do? What else can we do to also move passenger? And the Sunrail example, Sunrail is a good example of as I look at Commissioner Constantine, but he was senator at the time when we did the Sunrail deal. It was about, how does CSX and the state of Florida work together to come up with a plan to enhance freight movement in the state, but also to allow for a passenger system to be developed. And I think, as we look to develop passenger rail in the state of Florida, Brightline's a great example. They started out, they exist with the FEC Railway. So how can we take advantage of the assets that we already have to get things started? And we've done a great job with the freight side of things, and we're getting there on the passenger side.
John?
Good morning, everybody. Commissioner Dallari said it exactly right. This is the jobs train. This is about economic development. It's about a moment in time that we have as a community to take advantage of other programs that exist. Many of you are probably aware of the federal infrastructure package that passed that has massive investments in rail corridors, unseen before. What you're probably not aware of is the Florida legislature has been putting $60 million a year into a fund of new starts. That fund has about $270 million in it as it exists today. The FDOT Turnpike is doing a new interchange down in the Taft Island corridor. Why is that important? It's a moment in time because they're clearing some of the conflicts on that corridor that rail can now go through. We have a unique moment in time to do something game-changing here, and it's about jobs and economic development. Why? And why is Universal so interested? Because we are adding 14,000 new jobs in the next 24 to 36 months. That's just us alone, let alone the indirect jobs that are being created. iDrive alone will have over 100,000 jobs in that corridor. This is about putting people to their jobs without clogging the rest of the transportation system. But because of that moment in time on the funding side, we can do it for pennies or dimes on the dollar versus any time in our previous efforts. We've got a moment in time, folks. Make no mistake.
Christine, you want to add something?
I just want to add some context to John's comments. So I spoke of Brightline. We're getting to Orlando International Airport and starting operations from Orlando to Miami about this time next year. But we're also planning our next phase of the project, and that is to get to Tampa. And the route that we're looking at is coming out of the airport, a little bit along the commuter rail corridor, and then turning left in the Taft Island Road, where John mentioned, connecting the Convention Center, iDrive Activity Center, down to South International Drive, and then to Tampa. But those stations at the Convention Center and South iDrive, the Brightline facility can help facilitate the growth of commuter rail to the airport and to these activity centers that John just mentioned. So when we have this interrelated intercity passenger rail, which Brightline is, and using that same corridor to facilitate commuter rail, then you really start getting the activity of these areas for our visitors as well as our workers alike, which really serves all Floridians and our guests.
Commissioner?
I want to add to that. Thank you. A lot of times people will say, I don't take Sunrail because it doesn't go anywhere for me. I want to go someplace on nights and weekends. I want to go to the airport. Well, this point and place and time that John just talked about and Christine just talked about, going to the airport, is what people are looking for. You can't do nights and weekends with Sunrail today because there's really no anchor. You're not going to go to Winter Park or downtown Orlando, but you are going to go to the airport. That's why it's important for us to marry these systems together and look at the bigger system, because the airport's going to be the anchor for nights and weekends. The attractions are going to be the anchor for weekends. There's a lot more to it. And so sometimes people ask me, then why did we start Sunrail back in 2008 or 2012? Well, you had to start the line somewhere. If you're going to wait for everything, all the stars and the moon to align, we'll never do anything in this world. You have to start sometime in place to get the ball rolling. And that's what we've been waiting for.
So let's move down the line. We can start with you, because you had the mic in your hand. Rate Sunrail's success over the last 8 years.
If you look at transit area development, the cities in Seminole County I can talk to about. You got the city of Sanford. They're building some apartments right along the Sunrail corridor. Lake Mary's done a phenomenal job. Same thing with the city of Longwood. Altamont has not come out of the ground yet. Altamont is planning a huge economic development around that Sunrail corridor. Last year alone, the economic growth, tax-wise, of a half-mile radius around those 4 stations in Seminole County alone was $600,000. Some people say that may not be a lot, but it's a start. That's just the county's portion. That's not the city's portion. You can double that. So $1.2 million last year is directly related to Sunrail. So if we didn't have Sunrail, that growth would not have happened. And that's what this is about. It's about jobs. It's about growth. It's about economic development. Those are the successes that we've been seeing. And you're going to see even more as the years come up.
Bob, rate Sunrail.
Sure. So, like Commissioner Dallari said, it's a start. But from a redevelopment standpoint, huge success. So there's been billions of dollars of redevelopment that has happened along the corridor around the stations in the 4 counties. So, from a redevelopment standpoint, it's been a huge success. Ridership needs to grow, but I've got the jobs guy on my left and the redevelopment guy on my right. How do we connect housing, which is a critical issue in our region, to jobs, right? It's not enough just to have affordable housing in the middle of the nowhere. If people can't get to a job, it's not affordable housing, right? So how do we connect housing to jobs? And I think Sunrail is going to play a key part of that, and being able to connect with Brightline's help, being able to connect to the airport and to the convention center, and 125,000 jobs between those two activity centers, that's huge. So somebody can live in an affordable in housing in Seminole or Volusia or even down in Poinciana and be able to take the train to their job. And that's a key to both affordable housing and transportation, which are both critical issues in our region.
John, you want to rate Sunrail?
When I look at Sunrail, I look at a couple of things. It was a linear line, but as the commissioner said, you had to start somewhere. You had to have a moment in time where you started, okay? But I refuse to live in the past. I want to look at forward. What is the game changer here? How can we change where it's going? And build and quicken the economic development around that entire corridor. How do you do that? You got to get an east-west connection. You got to get this thing to not be just a linear line. Well, here we have an opportunity for what may be. And we have the former head of the FRA, okay, who's on our consulting team.
Tell me what that means, FRA.
FRA is the Federal Railway Administration. He's on our consulting team, and he believes we have the #1 project in the entire country here with the Sunshine Corridor because of what has come together between Brightline and Sunrail and all of us in the tourism corridor. And so I want to look forward. Universal, many of you may have read, and hopefully this becomes an example for many of the communities up and down the line. We donated 20 acres of land. Now, make no mistake, that land is about $1.5 million acres, $1.5 million an acre. Pretty pricey dirt. Wendover Partners is building affordable housing on that when we donated that land to a nonprofit that we created. Wendover gets the value so much that they're making a pledge to put a monthly Sunrail ticket, one ticket on every single one of those 1,000 apartments. Okay? Why? Because this has to go hand in glove, and we've got to understand how to do that. And if we do it right, We're so confident that iDrive, Maria Triscari's here with us, and the Orlando's Right Rail Coalition has stepped up and said, we're going to make this thing pencil from day one on the east-west corridor from the airport to the convention center. Okay, and then hopefully South iDrive as well and on to Tampa. But we're going to make this thing on the original corridor pencil. So iDrive and Universal are stepping up with a ridership guarantee of over $13 million a year because that line will pencil at that number. Okay? Our consultant said when he was heading FRA and had all the projects in the country underneath him, he had never seen a private pledge like that, ever. Again, moment in time.
So we are about halfway through and gotten to question number 2. So I'm going to jump up a little bit and let's talk, Christine. Why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about Brightline? Why, obviously Florida's had a lot of spits and spurts, trying to get high-speed rail here. You guys came in, privatized, launched Brightline. Why was the investment in Florida so critical for a private company to come in and do this?
Thank you. Well, let's talk about that history a little bit. In year 2000, we put high-speed rail on the constitutional amendment, right? And then the legislature adopted it. In 2009, Commissioner Constantine, and we worked closely in the legislature, there was the promise of the high-speed rail funding at the national level added to the ability to build Sunrail, that in 2009, that legislation finally passed that we had all worked towards. And then in 2010, $1.2 billion was granted by the Federal Railroad Administration to build high-speed rail. And then some people changed their mind and that kind of stalled, and that was to connect Tampa to Orlando. At the same time, and Bob's a previous Brightline employee, at the same time, the Florida East Coast folks, they owned the corridor from Jacksonville all the way to Miami, and they said, you know what? High-speed rail is the right addition for Florida. We are not linear, but we are dynamic, and you think about the 120 million visitors we have every year above and beyond those who call Florida home. If we connect the 5 largest urban areas, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm, Orlando, and Tampa, you are now connecting the 5 largest urban areas of the state, which becomes the 10th largest economy in the Western Hemisphere. So why do you want to connect it? It's because of economic development. It's about connecting our communities. We have a guest here right now from Dallari who's doing some business with UCF. What a great way for them to start their day down in South Florida, come have meetings, and then return easily and relaxed at the end of the day. It's quality of life, it's economic development, it's connecting our community and giving choices.
So, Bob, Commissioner, let's go back to the transit-oriented development, because you have some impact numbers that you'd like to share, and also it can talk a little bit about why this, how building a rail line 45 miles away from Sanford, down near the convention center, impacts us here in Seminole County and Sanford.
Well, just look at the numbers right there. You got Altamont, Longwood, Lake Mary, and Sanford. Those 4 stations totally have put the growth in those areas have contributed $1.6 million. TIF is tax increment finance. That's the future taxes of that area to the general fund of Seminole County. That's the growth we're looking at. That's just the start. That's going to escalate dramatically as the years progress. Because last year, if you looked at the numbers, it was about $400,000. This year total, it's around $600,000. That's the total. So you can see as the apartments and growth and even the commercial aspects happen around those stations, that's what pays for Sunrail. It's not the ticketing. The best scenario you can do for ticketing anywhere is 20%. That's the best. So if you're expecting for Sunrail to rely just on ticketing, how do you pay for your roads? You don't get charged on every day to ride the roads. It's the gas pump. It's taxes. So it can't be the ticket to get on and off Sunrail. It's the increase in tax revenue around those stations. That's why those numbers are so important. That's why it's important for us to embrace the cities. those 4 cities and their growth around those stations. We did that with the city of Longwood. They wanted to put an apartment complex in several years ago, but the apartment complex didn't have the ability to put parking in. So we allowed them to put a parking garage at their expense at the parking area of Sunrail. That's why there's a vertical structure there. That's how all this happens, is a partnership, just as we're talking about here. It's about economic development. That's what's going to make Sunrail grow and pay for itself.
But and this is one of the reasons why, again, going back to why somebody in Sanford should be concerned about a rail line going from the convention center to the airport, is that these grow substantially when you have nights and weekends, and the only way to get to nights and weekends is to have the airport convention center connections.
The big, I mean, just like the old, what people say, what came first, the chicken or the egg? How are you going to do rail? You have to have growth. You have to start somewhere. How do you get to nights and weekends? Well, now you need a partnership between the airport and the attractions. That's what we're talking about. You also need an attraction to go to South Florida. That's Brightline. All these connections are happening. That's what's going to drive the economic development around these 4 stations.
So, John, you've talked a little bit about the business, what you guys are doing. Why should other businesses get involved in some of the groups that you've talked about, get involved in, even, like I said, somebody up here in Seminole County, really start getting involved to try and make that connection to the airport and convention center and what you're talking about?
To me, it's very simple. With a linear line, Sunrail through just because it doesn't have that extra service, it doesn't have the ability to go east-west, it's going to lose in the range of $50 million this year. What we have is what might be the most profitable potential line in the country. That, one, will reduce the annual deficit. And why does that matter to Universal? Understand that I'm 1/10 of the ad valorem tax base of the city of Orlando. And the city of Orlando is one of those 5 funding partners. So it behooves me as a large taxpayer to, 1, help it. But 2, where are the jobs going to come? Where's that economic development going to come? And more importantly, how do we change how we move around Central Florida? If we get gridlocked and we can't expand into our future, then the deficits are only going to grow. We've got a moment in time here to really change the fundamental economic nature of this system. A system that bluntly has a great on-time record and is clean, and we can make it even more efficient by adding that east-west corridor. So why should people up here care? Because it's about getting a more stable base for the future growth of Sunrail and for expanding our transportation options throughout all of Central Florida.
So, Bob, are there communities out there that you can point to that say, I know we've talked a little bit about Salt Lake City, but are there communities out there that you say, look at them, they're doing it right, this is what we're trying to emulate, or are we kind of our own little special community here?
So the key to success is partnership. I mean, you said it. Partnership is what we need to make a railroad successful. So a rail system successful. So I'll give you 2 examples of states that are doing it well and 2 that are doing it not so well. And I think that's there's a lesson in both. I think the Commonwealth of Virginia is doing a great job when it comes to rail, and that's because you've got the Commonwealth working with the freight railroads, CSX and Norfolk Southern, as well as Amtrak, to expand rail and to invest in infrastructure that is good for the freight railroads, but it also allows for opportunities to expand passenger rail in the state. So they're doing a very good job. And Florida has done and continues to do a good job of partnering with private industry, both the freight railroads. We've got 2 private partners here that are investing a lot of money in this state, and I think that's the key to Florida's success. Look at 2 states that haven't done it well. California, they're building a high-speed rail system that's supposed to link San Francisco to LA someday. They're billions and billions of dollars over budget, and they're really nowhere near to being done. They started building it in the middle, not connecting to either of those major markets, and they're nowhere near. The other example of not doing it well is Texas. So California is trying to do it all government. Texas is trying to do it all private and connecting Dallas to Houston. And that system is just floundering. They can't raise money. Their CEO just quit. They're having trouble acquiring right away. And it's not going anywhere because it's all private. But Florida and Virginia are a great example of how it takes everybody working together, private industry and government working together to make something happen. And that's what I think is really exciting about the Sunshine Corridor, because you have everybody coming together at the federal level, state level, local level, and the private industry working together to make this happen.
So we have on the screen just kind of a map of the two lines that we've been talking about. Christine, can you kind of give just a timeline? When can we start riding to South Florida from the airport? And is there any sort of timeline to the convention center? And then that little stretch, that little arrow going down to Tampa? Because I drove to Tampa yesterday. It was a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I'm with you, my friend. Yeah, I'm back and forth to Tampa, and I refer to it as a box of chocolates. You just don't know what you're going to get. Is it an hour and a half? Is it 2.5 hours? You just don't know. So Orlando International Airport is so excited about their expansion of Terminal C, which opens up this month, and I know that they're very excited about that. Brightline is located at the train station at the airport. So you see that new development off of Jeff Fuquay Boulevard. And the airport, 20 years ago in their master plan, said, we're going to be the intermodal center of this community. And they invested in a facility, of which we're located, that accommodates 4 different technologies. The People Mover up to the North Terminal, high-speed rail, which Brightline is occupying that second spot. They've left room for Sunrail or Commuter rail to connect to that, and then some future technology, maybe light rail in the future, who knows. But this community's done a great job of being visionary and investing in that vision, and that's what that intermodal center is. So we are substantially complete with connecting West Palm Beach to Orlando International Airport, and so if you drive out the beach line, you see all that construction occurring off to the south there. That's Brightline. And we've been investing, over $2 billion to make that connection. We've kept over 6 million man hours during the construction of that quietly while we had a pandemic. We got a lot of other stuff done. So we complete that construction, and then we have to go through testing with the Federal Railroad Administration. So you'll start seeing some trains run on there. Early 2023, we'll qualify with the Federal Railroad Administration about this time next year, and so passengers will be going from here, Miami, West Palm, Fort Lauderdale, wherever you choose to go. At the same time, we're planning our connection to Tampa. And you heard a lot of John talk about the federal infrastructure bill. You may have heard an announcement that Brightline received it's called a CRISI grant, and that is for us to start designing from Orlando International Airport to Tampa. So that is underway. At the same time, we know that the I-4 program looks to widen I-4. So we're talking to DOT, the Florida Department of Transportation. How do we maximize that investment? And the way that you as a consumer sit there and say, wait, you're going to build a rail and then stop construction and then come back and widen it? Is there a way that we can package some of this together as large infrastructure to connect our two communities? So it'll take about 3 years to do the design work and the permitting and so forth, and about 3 years to construct. I tell you, our friends in Tampa, we cannot get there fast enough. And from kind of after you leave the convention center and get in I-4, we're after we get to South I Drive, we're in the I-4 median all the way to Tampa.
Do you know where the Tampa stop will be?
I do.
Will you share? No.
It's before you get to the I-275, I-4 interchange, Malfunction Junction. We didn't want to enter that. And so we're going to go to the Ybor City area, location to be determined.
Gotcha. Thank you. We've only got a couple of minutes left for this, and then I want to be able to ask a couple of questions in the audience. All right, so we've got great big plans. Let's keep going further future out. Orange County has a transportation tax on the November ballot that will help pay, they say, hopefully for a line up to Apopka and maybe out to Lake County. I've seen Fred Kittinger here of UCF. I know we obviously need a line, and Maritza in the back smiling at me now. We need a line from downtown out to UCF as well. When is all this stuff going to come?
Oh, so, assuming the sales tax passes in Orange County, and that's critical to all of this conversation because someone's got to operate and pay the operation of that. In that sales tax, Orange County has committed 45% of the revenues. It will generate about $600 million a year, of which over 50% will be brought on by tourists. So it is a very good marriage of what we're trying to do and make those connections, particularly to the activity centers that we're serving. So assuming that sales tax passes, let's keep our fingers crossed, then they began to be able to use that for both construction as well as operation and maintenance. And that's the unique element of this type of 1 cent sales tax that they're looking at. That is all part of the vision. I think the timing is getting to the airport is probably the highest priority, and then completing that east-west. And then that line to Apopka is an existing rail line that would need a great deal of upgrades and a lot of conversation. So that's early in planning process, but very much part of the long-term vision.
Bob?
Yeah, so when it will happen, the answer is next, right? Just as the north-south was a start, now we're focused on anchoring that north-south with a very successful, very profitable system from the airport to the convention center. And that lays the foundation for all kinds of possibilities moving forward. But we've got to get this east-west connection built first, and to anchor and to uphold the north-south line. And from there, it's up to the community.
If I just may add, when Sunrail was originally planned, we actually talked about the expansion of it. There are 3 rail corridors that are in the actual existing agreement that we can expand on. One is the DeLand Spur that takes the Volusia piece right into downtown DeLand. Then there's the Aloma Spur that takes the Sunrail from Sanford Station to the Sanford Airport down to the 417. And then there's the Apopka Spur that we just talked about. Those 3 corridors, we can exercise those agreements for very little money. It's basically $12 to exercise all 3 agreements. The issue is, it's not exercising the agreement, it's the infrastructure that would be needed to improve them for rail use. Right now, they're basically used intermittently, so the dollars of operation and maintenance is very low. But to upgrade them to passenger, it gets very expensive. We first have to, as we talked about, improving and making sure that we can afford the 61 miles that we have now, north and south, and talking about the east-west corridor that we're talking about, which is the Sunshine Corridor. That's going to be the first major piece of expansion. And then at that point, we need to look at the ridership to see where the ridership makes sense and growth makes sense. Thank you.
All right, we got time for a question or two, if there is anything. Yes, Shirley.
Thank you. I have a question. Yeah, we hear a lot about affordable housing. What exactly does that mean?
Who wants to tackle that one?
I'll address it since we're doing 1,000 units right now with Wendover. Affordable housing in that case is a mix. If you look at a task force that was put together in Orange County of community leaders, it discussed about a range. And if you're truly going to do affordable housing, right, you've got to have a myriad of folks. It's got to be a work, play, live type feel. And that includes anything from workforce housing actually to some scattering of market rate in the mix. And the reason why you do that is to make sure that you've got continuity. In our case, we put the land that we're doing into a nonprofit so we could guarantee the aesthetics, the look, the feel for the next 99 years. Because a lot of affordable housing, they come in, they develop it with all good intent, and then they end up flipping it in 15 years. That's not the intent here. Our intent is this is for the workers and for the beginning management and those type folks, that whole range that work in the I-Drive corridor and are going to continue. It's not just universal. In fact, federal law prevents it from being just universal employees living there. This is for our community.
So we got time for just a couple more questions to come to you. Jump forward. Let me go to you and then to John, and I think that's going to be it. I'm sorry, we're just going to try and rapid fire these down.
First of all, thanks, Bob, for explaining the nights and weekends thing. I appreciate that. So growing up north on Long Island, I was able to walk a half a mile, pick up a bus, take that to the downtown station, and ride that into New York City. So I don't know if this is any of your wheelhouse, but what about Lynx? Is there any plans for expansion for the Lynx bus system to support all the expansion of the rail system?
So right there, you're spot on, because we're in constant dialogue with Lynx. It's called the first and last mile. And we're always looking at that to figure out how to improve that first last mile. And Lynx is that asset that we're using.
John?
Good morning. John Gillen with Seminole State College. Last month, I traveled to Europe. I went to Commissioner Dallari's favorite country, Sweden. I used all the mass transit, used the trains, love it. Love the high density.
Men du pratar du svenska nu?
Don't have a clue. Tack, thank you.
Little
Loved
known
all,
fact
all
about
loved all the
Commissioner
high
Dallari, he
density
speaks
and
Swedish.
loved the conversations about connecting the east and west. I would love to be able to take the train down to Universal and ride the Velocicoaster. Yes. This question's for Christine, though. Brightline, all the construction going out and curving and making a right in Cocoa. I'm from Cocoa in the Space Coast. Can you definitively tell us, is there going to be a stop in Brevard County on the Brightline?
Gosh, these questions about stations. I will tell you that we have committed publicly to the County of Brevard that we are seriously going to consider a station, and it's likely in Cocoa. We do own property there. For Brightline to build a station, it's over $100 million. So it's not a small investment for us. And so that connectivity to the community, whether it's the port, the spaceport, the beaches, wherever, we need to work closely with the partners there to make sure that that distribution occurs. So just yesterday, I was working with the Space Coast TPO executive director to figure out a path forward of how that begins to look. No commitment right now for a station, as I know this will be saved for posterity. No, but a commitment to work together to find a resolution and figure out some partnership to make that happen. It is along from Cocoa to Orlando International Airport. Our train hits 125 miles an hour along the beach line. So that commute from Cocoa to Orlando International Airport is about 27 minutes. So what I've heard from the airport is that they have more pilots that live in Brevard County than any other area. So it'd be a great way to come and go.
So real quickly, we're going to wrap it up with one last thing. And maybe, John, you could take this. What's one thing that the folks in this room can do when they leave this room to help support future rail efforts?
Thank you. Become vocal advocates. You've seen some of the billboards up. Next stop, our future. We've got a moment in time to really be game changers here, so much so that my company is putting up $125 million, okay? iDrive is stepping up with a ridership guarantee, and we pledge to not only build but maintain the new stop at the convention center. Why is that important? That means the taxpayers aren't going to have to pick up a dime of that. So become advocates with us, because we have looked at it, we've studied it, and we do feel it's our moment in time. Please join us.
Commissioner, last word.
Right, Sunrail.
There we go. How about a nice round of applause for all this folks?
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the Seminole County Chamber, please visit seminolebusiness.org or check us out on our social media at Seminole County Chamber.